Welcome to Kukubo Crafts. It is time to get started on a new project. This is the long form version of my new Ren Fair costume. This will be part one of the process focused on my leather chess piece. For those of you that follow along to my daily crafting quest, this might not be new, but it will have extended cuts and include some of the things I've had to cut out for time in the shorts. So I hope you enjoy, and let's get into the process. To start, I'm getting myself wrapped in plastic wrap and tape. This is a great way to get a form-fitted pattern, as it will be your body's shape, and then you just draw on what you need and cut off to make the flat pattern pieces. Of course, this is so much easier with friends. Shout out to Katie at Bean and Bobbin. And then once it's all wrapped up, that is when my other wonderful friend helps me sketch it on, because it's really hard to sketch it on myself, and hers turned out a lot better than mine did. I also realized that references might make a little bit more sense. What we are looking at on the phone is this picture here. I believe it is a drawn image of Frita, the Rito, in Breath of the Wild. I just really liked her chess piece, so she is what I'm basing most of the top part of my costume off of, with some slight variations. This is my hand-sketched version of what I'm going for. My sketching skills aren't the best, but I hope they get the idea across. This process doesn't have to be perfect. We are scribbling out a lot of lines as we go, and we're just sketching out the rough shapes that we want, and we will fix it up a little later. But this is what it looks like once it is cut off my body. It's kind of strange seeing my body just like sitting in front of me, but pretty much I go in from here and do some final sketching work, and then I cut it apart. Does anyone else do crafts on the ground like a small child or a gremlin? I don't know. I always end up on the ground when I'm doing projects. And this is what it looks like all cut out. The next step in the process is creating a mock-up to make sure that it still fits on me using the templates that I created. I'm using felt for this because felt has somewhat similar properties to leather. As long as I don't tug it too hard, it is obviously a lot more flexible than leather, so it's not a perfect one-for-one, but it should get me pretty close. And it was also somewhere around this point that I realized every single one of these pieces was going to get hand sewed together in the end, and I don't know what I got myself into, but it should look really cool in the end. It's just a lot of hand sewing, which is not my specialty. Once I had it all cut out, I actually used safety pins to pin it together. I didn't want to use straight pins because I don't like stabbing myself. And this is the fastest way I could think of to easily temporarily tack these pieces together. I do need to be able to remove them and use them as the final template, because I did add seam allowance while I cut. This is a tedious process, but it's always worth it to make a mock-up, especially when you're using a material like leather, which is quite expensive. So it's worth the time and effort to take a little extra time to make sure you don't ruin the final product. That's my advice to everybody that is improvising a costume like this. But trying it on, I think it's gonna work. It looks pretty much like I wanted it to, and it fits super well, so success! There is one tiny little bit that I didn't like, and that was the ring I used for the back. So instead, I'm going to try and put a panel in the back, and this is why we do mock-ups. So we can try a few different iterations of things until we find one that we like. And with that, I had all of my pieces that I had to lay out on the leather that I had to see if I had enough, and the answer was no! I need to go to the store. So naturally, I picked up a few more things too. First thing first, I figured I'd show off the hardware that I got for the chess piece. I decided to go with this, like, brass color, and a kind of lighter brown. Since most of the costume's black, I thought that this would be a good contrast for it. And then I also got this new tool. It is a strap cutter, and I was convinced to buy this instead of getting pre-cut straps, because apparently that, plus the cost of leather,
is way cheaper for the amount of straps you can get out of a piece than the pre-cut straps are worth. So we're gonna give this a try. I think after briefly reading the instructions, you line up to the width you want here, and then you just pull it along the edge. I wanted to try this out first, which is why I'm not cutting the other pieces. Ooh. Okay, this cuts a way straighter line than I can cut myself. This was probably a good choice.
This makes such a good line, and it was such a good investment for all of my leatherworking needs.
And now we have a perfect strip here. It's definitely a lot better than I could cut with my rotary blade. I'm hoping that piece is enough for my shoulder straps, because that's the only strap I'm doing at 5/8 using the smaller clasp. And now for the rest of the parts, I have a thinner leather here that I'm using for the straps and detail work, and then a much thicker leather that will be used for the main pieces of the chest piece to kind of make it more realistic and sturdy. I wasn't recording. First piece. We have a piece. I'm using a rotary blade. Don't tell my mom. I'll buy her more blades. It's fine.
I think in most projects, cutting is the most tedious part, and this one does not break from that mold. There was a lot of cutting, and leather, it takes a bit of effort to cut, which is why I'm using a rotary blade, because scissors hurt. Even the rotary blade eventually makes my hand hurt, even with our little ergonomic handle one we have. I don't remember where this came from, but it's a pretty cool blade. And then you might notice as I am cutting that I am leaving a little extra space at the ends of some of the longer pieces, and I'm doing this for the straps. I did not take into account on my mock-up the amount of fold over that you need to put buckles on, or the tails that you would want for the whole part of a strap. I don't know what to call that, but the side that you poke all the holes in, and then it's like a belt. And as you can tell, I'm not working off of a pattern other than my mock-up, so some parts of this I'm just slowly shaving down little bits until it's the shape I think I want. And then in no time at all, it is all cut out. And here, let me show you what all of the pieces are going to be. Reminder, I'm gonna have to hand sew this whole thing together, which is not my favorite thing in the world to do, but it makes some really cool stuff, so I have to do it for the leatherwork. Also my hexagon quilt. I actually do a lot of hand sewing, even though I slightly hate it. But now that I have all these pieces cut out, it's time for the next step, which is not the hand sewing yet. I have a little more time before the torture. We get to go on to beveling, which might be the most tedious out of all of the steps. Fortunately, this is a task that easily fits inside of a bag, so I was able to grab my pieces and my tools and go hang out with some friends while working on this. Now, I absolutely hate the tool with the wooden handle. That is the beveler. They're terrible. It was a set from Amazon. I don't recommend them. The other tool, the crafts tool, the skeever, that one's fine. It's pretty great. I just don't know how to use it very well, so you might not see me touch it again because I'm scared to ruin my pieces. It's fine. Now, the purpose in beveling is to kind of take down the sharp corners after you've cut the leather, and you do this so when you do the next step, which is burnishing, I think that's the next step. Eventually you're going to burnish. You cut down these corners so you don't end up with what they call a mushroom edge, which just doesn't look good. So you cut down the corners first before you burnish. I just really wish I had a better beveler. And I went to Tandy Leather 3 times during this project and never remembered to buy new ones. So that's on me. I just get to deal with the crappy Amazon bevelers. And now this is such a time-consuming process for with seemingly small amount of pieces, I changed locations. And then just continued to do the exact same thing. I think it was pretty fun to watch the sun slowly drift over my table as I was doing this for so long. Crafting is a whole heck of a lot of persistence, but I think anyone can do it if they have enough time to be that persistent. Now, I really wish that I knew how long this actually took me, but I did it all in one day. So I'm guessing it was about 5 hours of beveling and a little bit of skeeving where I felt brave enough to do it. But then finally, I got to doing some dyeing. And now my ability to dye leather is questionable, but I like the kind of smudgy, rusticy look that it turns out, so I've never really gone in to figure out how to actually do it. You are supposed to use water or even an oil to help spread the dye to make it more even. I used a little bit of water today, kind of forgot about it for a minute, but there was a little bit of water used on these. Also, if you noticed earlier that my fingers were blue, I'm really good at getting dye on things. That was just from me touching a bottle, and I knew I was going to get dye on this mat. So I very explicitly asked my friend, hey, can I get dye on your mat? And this is the funny part. She told me, yeah, sure. And then I found out she wasn't actually paying attention and just automatically gave me an answer and walked over and went, oh, I hope that comes off. No, she's stuck with dye forever. But look at all the progress I made today. I'm going to be able to start hand sewing tomorrow, and I'm doing one last thing tonight, adding some neat's foot oil to the leather before bed, but that's not very exciting. So I'll see you all tomorrow. The next morning, I went down to the craft tent and started the burnishing process. You do this typically with a hand tool and just rub it really, really fast, but I've never gotten that to give me a really nice edge. And then I found these bits for my Dremel tool, and it works so freaking well. I am so thankful I have these bits now because this process used to be a lot slower. Now, I didn't have time to do all of these this morning because I was actually going to go play D&D, so I prepped a good chunk of them, and then I went upstairs and I punched the first holes so I can stitch while playing D&D. To make the holes, I use these little fork tools that have a even separation to make some very nice and clean stitch lines. I will say these tools with the screw-on forks are a little cheaper than if you bought the forks all separately, but they are weaker, so you have to be a little more careful with them. I always put a sacrificial piece of leather behind it, and today I am using a hammer covered in leather because my friend's borrowing my mallet. So I'm making a mess on the table because I am quickly decimating the leather I put on the edge of that hammer. And the reason that I don't just take it off and hammer straight is you really don't want to use a metal hammer on your metal tools because it will damage the tools. Once I had a few ready to be stitched, I headed off to my D&D game, where I proceeded to stitch for pretty much the whole entire time we were playing, which was about 4 hours. Also, to all of you who love my dice, because I've gotten some of those comments, I'm sorry. They're both from Kickstarters and don't exist anymore. But they are phenomenal. They're my favorite. I will continue using them in videos, so apologizing for now and forever in the future. Now back to the leather. When you sew leather, you do it with 2 needles, and I am not very efficient at this, so it takes me forever, but that's fine. It creates a really tight seam, and I think it'll be just fine as a chest piece that will get a lot of movement. I wanted to do it this way because I wanted a pretty visible seam, and I just think that stitches go with my costume's aesthetic way better than rivets do. The last piece of armor I made is all put together with rivets and little things called Chicago screws. was a heck of a lot faster, but it doesn't have the same look to it that a nicely hand-stitched piece of leather will have. So I am taking the time to do this. My little fork things didn't do a good enough job, so yes, I am having to re-punch every single hole with my awl. But at least the holes are marked, and they are very straight and pretty. I didn't get to all of the seams that I punched out today, but I honestly didn't think I would. I just wanted to make sure I had enough to keep me busy the whole time I was playing. And no, I am not the only one doing crafts at our D&D table. This is just my group of friends, so it's completely acceptable. And now, look, I got 3 whole rows stitched. It's coming along. I'm so excited. And then the next day dawned, and I was right back down in the craft tent with my burnishing tools, getting the rest of the pieces prepped. Then it was back upstairs.
All of the leather has been prepped, and now I just need to punch in the holes for all the stitching and get about doing all of that work. Let's get into it.
Can't decide if this process is more or less annoying than the burnishing, but it is definitely less annoying than doing all of the beveling. But my arm was a little tired after this one. I did have a couple breaks.
And we are back. I had to take a phone call that hopefully leads to good things, but had to rip my phone off the tripod because it's my recording device. I would really like to be able to get a camera that would be the dedicated recording, so my phone is not held hostage by the tripod. But you do what you gotta do currently. So, continuing to punch holes. I have a few more pieces. These are more tabs for buckles, so I have to put in their buckle holes. I don't actually know if those have a name. That's fine. We, I think, need to switch one up. This buckle's a little bigger. Also gonna leave a tab this time. Still eyeballing because I am a creature of chaos.
I've also tried very hard to train myself not to be a perfectionist, because if you just do it, it's probably going to be right, and whatever mistakes there are, nobody but you is going to notice.
And I'm making these adjustable for 2 reasons. The first is that it's nicer to get on and off when there's a bunch of points that things can get taken apart. And then the second is because leather stretches when you've worn it in. So I need to be able to have easy points where I can take in the size after I've worn it for a little while.
Also, thicker leather, I would honestly suggest getting a hammer hole punch, because the pliers get a little bit difficult to press. Which you can see I eventually pulled out because I gave up on the pliers. It just wasn't going to happen anymore. And then once I got all the straps put together, it was time to go and punch the last of the stitch holes. At least for now, because there is going to be a few more I have to do after the rest of the seams are done, because I need holes to line up, blah, blah, blah. But time to go and start a stitching.
Alrighty. Time to get comfortable and get back to the hand sewing. Now there's a really cool trick that I learned specifically with this kind of thread, is that you can impale straight through it, and that creates a really nice lock. So your tail never pulls out. Now I have to ask, if you made it to this part of the video, do you like this kind of content where it's more me chatting, kind of doing something but you don't really see that? Or do you prefer what I've been doing, which is having the camera on what I'm doing? I don't know.
Alternatively, do you think it's worth it for me to actually get a second camera so I can have multiple angles going? That's probably what I will inevitably do. Don't know if I'm quite there yet. If anyone has camera suggestions, let me know.
Come here. Come here. Hey. Hi, baby boy. He wanted to be on camera. Yeah. He's so needy. Meow. I really hope I'm not the only one that ends up meowing back to my cats. We talk like that a lot. I do love them. They're so silly. And if you want to know, his name is Oliver, also known as Baby Boy, and quite a few other nicknames that you may hear come out of my mouth at some point. Oh, look, Skywalker also wanted to be on camera today. He's a cutie. Okay, pet distractions aside, we are sewing and sewing and sewing, because that is what needed to be accomplished today. And then it was on to the next day. Which, fair warning, I am going to start getting a little rambly because it was a long day of sewing that I kept talking to myself. But I promise it's all relevant and I kept it in for a reason. Enjoy the struggles. I got my coffee and I'm ready to finish my chess piece. I definitely am going to have this done today, and I don't know what I'm going to do after that, but let's get this done first. I actually have 2 small pieces of thread from the last seam that I did, so I am going to sew these tabs onto this guy first. Yes, and I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to put this, so this has no holes yet, but alls are a magical thing. No, I think, yeah, I'm gonna center this, because I think that's gonna look the best. I chaotically made this shape, so I could change it, but I think I like what's happening, and then I'll sew this on. Hopefully it's not too wide. We'll find out. Foreshadowing alert, my famous last words. Would it make more sense for me to stand up and go use my hammer one? Yeah, but I don't want to get up, so I shall just struggle through the 8 holes that are here. Ooh, I almost just sewed that on backwards. Oh. And this is why we have coffee in the morning, so I don't sew things on backwards. I almost caught my inevitable mistake so many times. But I was just going on with confidence because I totally thought I knew what I was doing, and I was like, I made this pattern. I'm doing great. Let's go. But you'll see in just a second when I finally realize what I did. This side is attached. Time to attach the other side. And no, it was not then that I realized what I did wrong. I kept going with so much confidence. I even started prepping the next section because I thought I was done with that. And then I finally realized it. Guys, I just realized I put these on the wrong piece. This goes to right here, which means this was supposed to be this. And this is why we have scissors. Or a seam ripper, but I don't want to get up to go find a seam ripper, so I'm cutting off these threads. At least the holes are already punched. And it didn't take me that long to sew them on. Also a hazard of making your own patterns, so you completely forget where you're supposed to be putting pieces. These buckles are for the lower part, and my brain just completely forgot that that was a thing. But at least they were small seams and not one of the big ones. More coffee. Definitely more coffee. We're fine. Genuinely, I don't think any amount of coffee would have actually saved me from that one. But because we already prepped my needle for double sewing, we will come back to these strappy bits. And here they are, we'll get on to what I was doing, which is on my lap. Hazard of wearing an orange shirt today. I'm blending. Oh yeah, that's what I was doing. I was looking for the all when I realized I had pieces that I was like, oh no, where did that go? We are fine, everything's great. Every single one of my projects, inevitably, there's something I have to take out. Even with that setback, I still didn't think this would take me all day.
Let's just say I was wrong.
I do genuinely think I've gotten faster at this over the last few days, which is great, because it took me like 5 hours to sew the first 3 seams. I also, punching holes bigger really helps.
The problem with the day was not actually the sewing part. It was everything else around the sewing part that I had to go run and do, which is why this took me so freaking long today. But I never want to give somebody the wrong impression that crafting isn't extremely time consuming, especially things like leatherwork. So I will do my best not to cut too much and also to leave in all of the struggles because I think they're important.
Okay, now to sew the correct pieces onto here. These two. More coffee.
I was still pretty happy with the day. Things were going well and I was just stitching on away, but this is where the second long time suck for the day showed up.
Well, momentary setback. I apparently made this a little loose. So I was able to pretty much completely get rid of that whole piece. And I don't want to completely get rid of that whole piece. What to do? What to do? I think this is my plan. I'm going to cut down these straps, and I'm also going to cut down this piece. I need to go find scissors.
When life gives you something too long, the answer is always scissors.
Also, I genuinely have no idea how that happened. Because the mock-up... I think I had this coming completely into here on the mock-up. That would explain it.
Also, here's another reminder for you not to be a perfectionist. I freehand cut this because I'm chaos. And in the end, it turned out fine.
I need to go stain and burnish these edges, and then I'll figure out how far into this I'm going to sew it down. It's probably decently far in, which makes me think I should trim that a little bit more. This is fine. I will be back after I have stained and burnished these new edges. And we're back. Piece is much smaller now. Strap's also much smaller now. We're gonna sew these on and hope it fits now. Where's my needle? Needle. Needle.
Have you noticed how many times I've managed to lose things on myself today? I think I was just too tired to craft today, and then I kept going. But I really, really wanted to get this chest piece done so I can move on to the best part, the wings.
Huzzah! We are attached. It feels pretty comfortable. Oh my god, this is so exciting. Okay, but I might have to wait until somebody's home to get these to the right length. Don't think I can do that behind my back. I mean, we can try. Because I'm determined like that. I do have them pretty low on here so I can tighten them. Finger. Woo! Can I see it? Yeah, I can see that. And then we just go swoink. And now I have 2 more ends that I need to go run downstairs and stain and burnish again. I'll be back. It's also 1 p.m. and I still haven't finished my coffee.
Maybe that's the reason I was struggling so hard. Coffee's important for a addled Joe's brain. I spy a tuxedo cat.
Well, hello, Missy. Hi. You got Oliver yesterday, and today you get Misty. And that's fine. She can stay there.
Misty is generally more cuddly than Ollie.
Friend. You're on my arm. Yeah, okay. Bye. Okay. Let's try it on one more time. Okay. That was a mildly wild adventure to get the upper part done, but we just have this bottom seam and a few more strappy bits to add. So let me go hammer the holes in for this one. On to the last seam. This one's gonna take me a while, so let's get it done.
It was about this point in the day where I gave up on talking to the camera and started watching my comfort show, which is Pokemon. I adore it and watch the new seasons every single time they come out. It's always nice to have something to watch while finishing up the tedious bits of a project. I was getting so close and I just needed a little bit of distraction to keep me going. And before I knew it, I was tying the knot in the last long seam and was getting ready to sew on the last couple bits. Then I realized there's a little bit more work. Sigh. Nothing is ever as easy as you think it is.
All right, the last big piece is on. I just have to add the back strap, which I was messing with, and it looks like to fit comfortably, it's gonna come in at an angle. So I think I'm actually gonna trim down this corner, and then I'm also up here going to trim in right here because I don't like this corner either. So gonna do those, attach the strap, and I'll show you when it's done.
And then one final step is I am burning my knots so they stay nice and strong and will never pull out. I've had many a leather project pull out before I realized that this thread melts. Before I get to the final reveal, I just want to thank everybody for watching and joining me in this long form video. Up next is going to be my long form of my wings, so like, subscribe, comment, and join me the next time. Now let's get into the final reveal.
What do you think? I'm so excited. It's done. I have the first part of my costume made. It's not perfect. It's not even exactly what I intended, but I'm pretty happy with it. And I'm really excited to get on to the next parts, especially ones that don't make my hands hurt. But we're done for the day. I'm gonna go edit some videos and probably play video games, but I'll see y'all tomorrow for whatever comes next.